Hi, I'm violinist Anne-Sophie Mutter. You will watch now Living the Classical Life and much more.
Anne-Sophie, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Pleasure.
And thank you for giving us your time during your very busy
I
schedule.
hope you still will thank me after our conversation.
So one of the things that I've been very curious about in the world of performers is the subject of charisma and magnetism. You were 13 when you first encountered Herbert von Karajan. And he, for me, especially embodied a complete immersion in his craft, but he exuded a charisma and magnetism that I can't imagine what it must have been like for you at 13, and then perhaps now, in retrospect. Is that something that still stays with you? And how did you regard that energy of his?
Yeah, energy is precisely the point. When I met him on December 11th, 1976 in Berlin, I of course had already known about him, although I was very young, because my first recording I bought from my pocket money was Bruckner 4. And since then, I love Bruckner and I'm a great admirer of Karajan. But what struck me when I met him, when he entered the room, was that presence. He was not a tall man. I wouldn't say frail, but there was something in him. There was this energy, this command of the room, which I think words kind of cannot really describe. When he conducted, and I was in the audience, what you could sense was the inner tension in his body, which was aligned with the musical tension. So he didn't just, conduct here. His entire upper body, the body between his shoulder blades, he literally molded the music, and I think that helped also, particularly the string players, to follow these long-spun musical ideas, which in the German-Austrian repertoire are so apparently also linked with the German language. So yes, charisma. I mean, he was the embodiment of charisma and has stayed that way. And some of the most interesting aspects of his personality had to do with change, with curiosity, with humbleness, and with unstillable quest for yet another high point in a musical interpretation. So after the most wonderful, let's say Bruckner 7, the next morning he would just start from scratch again. He would rehearse only the string section. In the string section, only the violins, only the violas. Mind you, these were golden times. I feel like a dinosaur when there was still time invested in rehearsals. And that is the reason why orchestras like Berlin Philharmonic and Vienna Philharmonic have developed a singular sound, which is so clearly theirs, a real profile. And you can only do that when you have a chef conductor who takes the time to talk to the musicians, to mold them to one instrument. So at the end of the day, you don't have to look at the conductor. You don't even have to feel him, which is unavoidable if Karajan is on stage. But the thing is that suddenly these 80 souls, these 80 bodies, these 80 musicians become one. And that is just the most beautiful thing in music making, that you are suddenly one instrument.
So if at that age you already encountered such an incredible musician as he was, was that rather intimidating, or in fact, the energy swept you up and brought you into your best element? 13 is an early age to encounter such a magnificent statured musician.
Particularly over 40 years ago, where a 13-year-old girl was still very much a girl. And I grew up at the foot of the Black Forest meadows and, a forest around, and sports and music had been and reading, my great passion. I grew up with two older brothers. So meeting Karajan, it was a little bit like meeting John Williams. like this person from a totally different, seemingly from a different universe, and it seemed to be so absolutely impossible to ever meet your great idol. So now at age 56, or when I met John, I was younger, I'm meeting John Williams, and I have these flashbacks to my meeting with Karajan. Anyhow, I was very intimidated by John Williams. I was not intimidated by Karajan because I was so young and so totally kind of hopeless when I flew to Berlin in order to audition for him, because I was invited by him to audition. Otherwise, I would have never gone there. Out of free will, forget it. So I was absolutely convinced he would, of course, send me home, and out of whatever strange reason, he didn't send me home, and out of that audition came 13 years up till his death of collaboration. No, I wasn't intimidated on a human level, because I was way too young and innocent and kind of, I can only play as good as I can. And if I would have been 10 years older, oh boy, I would have probably trembled, And I still remember when we went on stage, that was at the Whitsun Festival in '77, playing Mozart's G major violin concerto, so my first performance with Herbert von Karajan. We were standing backstage in the curtains and waiting to go on stage, and he asked me, "Are you nervous?" And I kind of shrugged and said, "No, why?"
Oh,
I will never forget the expression on his face. He was kind of, why is he nervous?
So if you've experienced that success, or at least an early taste of the podium on a world stage, and you've seen the trajectory of a long development career, and you look at the world today, with the musical industry changing, the recording industry changing, and the musician's search for deeper meaning, it's hard for me not to observe on social media and elsewhere musicians who seem to either desire to portray themselves in a certain way, or the industry wishes to portray them in a certain way. I'm thinking of photos that have to look almost like a model, Instagram posts that look like a movie star lifestyle. It's portraying a lifestyle rather than music. What do you make of these changes that you've seen during your time?
I think we are all on this planet for a purpose, and I see my purpose as an artist to bring music forward, to bring people together, to touch people, to leave with my interpretation of new music, but also of repertoire we have lived with for centuries, to leave a lasting memory. But I think my life as a musician should also be a life where I try to be a useful member of human society. That's why I do quite a bit of benefit concerts, why I have a foundation, and I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. I wouldn't say reluctant, but I'm on my own pace. I know I should do much more, but I've never been an artist who wanted to be seen as more than an artist. I love my fans. I love the fact that they are interested in Penderecki as much as they are interested in film themes, which John Williams has rewritten for me. But there's a certain privacy I need, time to study I need, and when I want to share something with my fans, like I'm asking for a cheesecake recipe, or I'm pointing out that one of my dogs is very, very sick, and if someone knows something about lymphoma and tackles, I'm very grateful for a response, but I'm doing it on my own terms. And I do believe that this is very important for a person who is living in the public eye, but particularly as an artist. This is important because I feel that I need time to reflect, I need time to study, I need time to stay humble, I need time to stay grounded, stay with my children and be someone observing the world and taking part in it and trying to, once again, be a positive influence. And for that, I have to find the core of my being, not in a certain lifestyle, which maybe one would expect or whatever. Never mind, I don't care what is expected. I just try to be a serious musician who is not blindfolded when it comes to social causes and these matters.
In your musical life, did you always feel the space to just be your authentic self, or did you feel pressure to portray yourself in different ways in order to reach different opportunities? The reason I ask, I get the sense that musicians these days do feel a pressure to succeed right away and to portray themselves in a particular light that maybe has nothing to do with actually who they are or the musical content that they're trying to express.
You know, the way I grew up, there's this moment in my life when I was maybe 11 or 12, and my mother, I had just read the Diaries of Anne Frank, pointed out that how much it meant to her generation that after the Second World War, Yehudi Menuhin came so fast back, and he was the first Jewish musician coming back to Germany. So I was aware that music is not there to serve me as a tool to become famous or rich or whatever, but music had a purpose in society. Music has a purpose in human history. And then, you know, when I later worked together with Mrs. Rostropovich, who had given shelter to Solzhenitsyn and Sakharov, both famous writers who back then had criticized the Soviet Union and had to go to labor camps, and then he was expelled. Slava was expelled with Galina, his wife, from Russia, from the Soviet Union. And I saw what it means to take responsibility and to be an upright human being, and what music can do, and what a political force also music can have. Think of Shostakovich symphonies and how many, you know, political messages and how much he endured, and so many others have endured in political systems who the artists, you know, when they didn't cater to the will of the dogmatic thinkers. So in my world, when I grew up, there was just that kind of very purposeful view on music. And we need to go back to that. We need to see music not as a pastime. You know, the other day I had a master class. This is a long answer to your question. You probably want a short answer,
No.
but I'm German. Germans take time. So I had a master class in Cincinnati, and one of the four violinists who played, the last one who played Shostakovich first violin concerto, first movement, he is a violinist who comes from the La Sistema school. And you could really tell in his playing that the violin for him was, I wouldn't say an escape, because music is not an escape from reality, but it had a profound meaning. It was not just a hobby, something you do. I could be a violinist, but I could also be, you know, I don't know, an architect. For him, it meant, it had a deep meaning, had a deep emotional connection. And that is what a musician has to find. Never mind if there is pressure from the industry. There always has been pressure. The question is, how do you respond to it? And one of the most important things I think in my foundation for me is to point out to young musicians that you need to have the breath and also the dedication to hang in there. And we all can find in this huge garden of music eventually a niche where we are needed as teachers, as chamber music players, some of us having music as a hobby, not as a profession. We need to stay realistic, and before selling your soul, you better be realistic why you want to be a musician.
Well, if we talk about this, the musician's role in the world today, and whether or not what we do is, as you say, an escape from reality, well, then we ask, why are we musicians? Are we in fact existing in a bubble of sorts, or do we really reach all people?
You can never reach all people. I don't think that I live in a bubble. True is that classical music has, out of whatever strange reasons, been put in an ivory tower, and that has become exceedingly more prominent in the last decades. It has to do with a lack of understanding of society, that music is the glue which holds us together. Music is the glue in kindergarten which brings different songs of different cultural heritages and religions together. When children still don't speak each other's languages, they can sing their songs. They can meet on this emotional playground of music. They can, through music, learn to lead, but also be part of a group. We must understand that music is an essential part of being human, behaving human. It is life in a microcosmos. That is why it is not acceptable that classical music is supposed to be there for the lucky few. Music is therefore all the lucky few who, first of all, need to have a music education in the school. Second of all, we need more music being present in the media. And third of all, I think the role of myself, for example, is to look out for venues where I can reach an audience which feels intimidated by Carnegie Hall. So I love to do club concerts. I will do more open air concerts. I just did my first proper open air concert in Munich, where I'm at home since a few decades. And it was a wonderful experience. Actually, at a given moment at the end of the concert, I thought, do I ever want to go back into a normal concert hall? Yes, of course I want. Because it's almost sacrosanct meeting point where we can meet in silence, total concentration, and forget the day's worries and just immerse ourselves into century-old musical messages which connect with us on an intellectual, but most important, on an emotional level, as if they would have been written yesterday. So we need to work on the fact that classical music needs to get out of the ivory tower, needs to have different settings in which we perform music, different classical repertoire, where we can introduce this wonderful gift from whoever, at least from the composers, to a lot more people.
As a performer, I'm always curious to understand from the performers I admire, artists being the, in some cases, highly sensitive people that they are, how is it possible?
We would hope so.
We would hope so. How is it possible from night to night to find the zone of this concentration? What is
it possible?
Is it possible to find this consistency, the concentration? For me, I would consider the consistency the biggest challenge from night to night.
Yeah.
Do you have any strategies, or is this something that you even consciously think of, or you're just there with the music?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of that. It seems that I have had since an early age a good way to focus. I can, in fact, focus on something and just be at it. Probably it has also been training. Maybe it has to do that I'm a rather stubborn person, and when I hang on to something, I really hang on to it. So that might also serve me as a musician in order to really focus. I meditate. I love what I'm doing. I immerse myself totally. So being out of focus is out of the question. Yes, of course, there are evenings where finding the focus seems to be more difficult, and very often I can't even tell you why. The day might have been perfect rehearsal, I had a rest, I had the right kind of food, of course, no caffeine, no sugar, nothing heavy, blah, blah, enough sports, sleep, and so on, check, check, check. And still I go on stage at 8 and I cannot find the sweet spot, this golden moment where time, people, and music, we are one. This kind of flow. There is no recipe to it. And I take great, what should I say, great comfort in the fact that even a great athlete like Roger Federer, he cannot win Wimbledon every year. It just is not possible. He for sure prepares high fits. But it's just, we are humans. So do I have a recipe? No. Keep on trying and keep on memorizing what you did on a given evening when things went particularly well, in order to learn if there is, a relationship between your actions before the concert and the concert itself. But let's not forget, life is even more important than a concert. I remember concerts where, when my daughter was a teenager, we used to have long, exciting conversations on the phone when I was gone, which went on until 7:59, and then at 8 o'clock I needed to go on stage because the concert started. And like this, I had to focus right away. So I guess as a single mother of 2 children, you do learn to focus.
This is absolutely astonishing, because I can think for myself, certain evenings where I'm so out of the zone that I in fact think, can I actually walk out onto the stage? Have you
Really?
Have you ever felt that way?
No.
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 consider yourself very lucky. If you consider your relationship to the audience, are you aware of your audience? Are you consciously part of their experience? Are you apart from them? I know that the great Russian pianist Sofronitsky always had to imagine barriers between himself and the audience. Other musicians, Rubinstein, had to feel the embrace of the audience.
Particularly of the female audience, I think.
Yes, yeah, probably.
So yes, I do feel the audience, and I need them to be there with me because I'm playing for them. And one ear is, of course, I guess with the pianist it's the same, although physically you are not so close to the instrument. You know, one ear is on the instrument, I'm hearing what it does and I'm adjusting, but my other ear is listening into the hall, not only for the acoustics, but sensing the vibes. Are they with me? Can I do something? How can I persuade them? How can I bring them into the piece? It is a very exciting, it can be a very exciting relationship, and it most of the time is a very exciting relationship to have this voyage together, this togetherness, definitively no barriers. Recently, I performed a concert in America and someone was sitting in the first row holding a mobile phone up right into my face. And that is, of course, I find that extremely disrespectful towards the orchestra, the conductor, and myself. Extremely disturbing for the music, and because the concert hall is the last place, maybe other than church, where we can just for once, without any tools at hand, just let it penetrate let it get through our skin, absorb it with all you are. And not through a machine. Nothing is as beautiful as your memory. No mobile in the world, no photography, no recording in the world can reproduce that. And why do you want to reproduce it? Isn't it most beautiful the first time the man of your life is telling you, I love you? How would it be if you have it on your iPhone? Would you listen to it every day? It's just not the same thing, Some things are so beautiful, like music is. Yes, there are recordings under perfect circumstance where the sound comes close to what the artists want, where their musical expressions, even if it's a live recording, are what they want the audience to have as a preserved memory of them. But other than that, let's really keep these live moments sacrosanct, and let's keep them personal, here and there.
Is there a way to guard ourselves against these types of distractions? I'm thinking of Alfred Brendel in the Lincoln Center in the late 90s. He was playing the first movement of Beethoven Moonlight Sonata, and the audience was coughing like crazy. And then he stood up, he said, ladies and gentlemen, once you have stopped coughing, I will resume playing. So he walked off, then he came back on, and when he returned, there was not a single sound.
Kurt Masur did that once. I think it was the beginning with New York Philharmonic when he was chef here decades ago. It was the beginning of Time Chant by Riem, which starts with 2 single notes in the violin in pianissimo. And there was just no way I could start because people were not settled in. And so Kurt took me by the hand and he stormed off stage. Of course, the audience was kind of totally in shock. And no announcement, nothing. A few minutes later, he didn't talk to the audience. We walked back in, and I think everybody got the message that silence is a part of music, and we need, to interact.
But then the question becomes, after such an interaction as that, which is in of itself already disturbing, is it possible to return to that level of concentration?
Yes.
I can think of certain instances. I, as an audience member, witnessed great performers who stopped and spoke to the audience to behave a little bit better. Yeah. But afterwards, they had a very, very nervous performance. Yeah. Did you feel on that instance that you were able to return?
I can see it on both sides because there was this wonderful festival for Sophia Gubardulina a few years ago in Germany, and I was seated next to her. And I had the most horrible cough attack in my life. And I knew, by no means I can cough now. I'm sitting next to I'm a musician, I'm sitting next to the composer. I almost died. So I do know things like that happen. And yes, there are moments when, we are human enough that we need to cough. Question is, how loud do you cough? And, all of that. But yes, I'm not taking, noises from the audience as an offense. It just happens. And when you gently remind the listener that, hello, you hear me, I hear you, let's just start anew. Usually I can let it go and just, start afresh and hope for the better.
Do you feel that there are certain personality traits that differentiate good musicians from the great ones? What are the differences there, if any? Is that something that's innate, or say a characteristic of resilience? It seems that you have an ability to bounce back and to just focus, but really, does it come down to only that?
No, certainly not. And then, of course, the question is, what makes a great artist? I think the arts in itself and the way we perceive an interpretation is very subjective. And, back in the days when Rostropovich was alive, there were, of course, Rostropovich fans, and then there were János Starker fans, and one wouldn't go to the other. And I have to confess, I was a Rostropovich fan. I never went to the Starker concerts, which, of course, I'm sure was a loss. What I'm saying is, we can debate, what a great musician is. It can come in many forms, in many interpretations. Some of them very, how should I say, imaginative, others more dogmatic. There's an audience for many different styles of musicians. So that is part of my answer. That, not all of us can please everybody, and that's not the point. Maybe resilience is part of it. I strongly believe in questioning yourself should be part of it. But there are musicians who go about life and play pretty much the same since, 20, 30 years, and they are happy with their life and their audience is happy with them. The other day, someone came after a concert of mine and actually accused me of not playing like on the recording. He was very disappointed that my Four Seasons were much different from my recording from 1999. I actually took it as a compliment. He was offended. So what can I say? You can only try your best, and I take great joy from my conversations with living composers, because I learned so much about their, not insecurities, but their search for the perfectly written line, the phrasing, the orchestration. And what I find as a kind of common ground always is that they are always on the search, always on the hunt, always dissatisfied, always questioning themselves. And that, I think, makes a great artist in general, if it's a writer, a painter, whatever.
Now, I know that you have started exploring more chamber music collaborations. One question of my younger colleagues is how to balance sticking with your own artistic convictions and feeling an idea strongly versus being open to the suggestions of your colleagues.
I think the more persuasive your ideas are, the better you are off, basically. And I think I can be rather persuasive, musically speaking, but I am very open-minded, I think. When it comes to my collaboration with Lampard Orchestra, we work now together since 32 years, I think. Just now we re-rehearsed the Kreutzer Sonata and Opus 23, 24, and we were discussing tempi. And then, of course, we look at Czerny's tempi and the tempis we used to take. And, I'm always I told Lambert today something, and he asked me if he can use it as a teacher. I told him, I don't want to repeat my mistakes. I rather make new mistakes. So what I say with that is, because I have played Beethoven sonatas 20 years ago a certain way, does by no means mean that there were good reasons for me that I have to repeat that. So I'm rethinking, the tempis and everything which comes with it. So it's a constant, I guess it's a constant flow, it's a constant search.
I've had a particular awareness of your traversal of Beethoven, I guess, since I was growing up and in boarding school for music. And I remember there was the video series. Okay. And I remember my colleagues at that time, they were surprised at how personal, whatever that means, these readings were.
Yeah.
What does feedback like that mean to you when you hear it?
I know that my playing is highly personal. That's why I am a musician. That's, why I make music. Because when I talk to someone like Gubaidulina and she explains me how how she perceived in Tempo's presence. It was apparently this gigantic ball of sound. And then she sat down and she was trying to write down what she had heard in that instant. But much of it escaped her while she was writing. And for some of the sounds she had in her inner ear, there are no instruments. And she told me it's like something deep frozen. What I write down is just a shadow of what I imagined, just a shadow of what I've heard. So now my craft is to bring these dots on the black lines back to life, which means that I understand what a composer writes is just a roadmap. But along the road, there are trees, there are flowers, and it's on me to, following the musical flow, make sure that the journey is as personal to the listener as it was for the composer to write it down.
So then what do you make of performers today? If I listen to them, of course, we have personalities, we have individual artists. Trifonov, for example.
Bunyatisvili. Yeah, and then, of course, Martha Argerich and Sokolov.
Yes.
I mean, I think there are a lot of fabulous pianists out there.
But then I go back to, say, speaking of violinists, the old world violinists, Kreisler and Jacques Thibault, these guys sounded so different. David Oistrakh. These guys sounded so different from each other. If we could say that the differences back then were larger, what do you think accounted for this? Why the change? I wonder whether or not that's the expectations of the clinical precision of the recording industry and the expectations there.
You know, the funny thing is I just finished a book by Joseph Szigeti, and which was published in around 65, and he is commiserating about the fact that there's a crisis in violin playing, and funnily enough, I think today is a crisis in violin playing. We have lost a great number of wonderful teachers, and great performers like David Oistrakh, obviously Franco Gulli, to name a few. And with losing these teachers who had a very personal and individual style of playing, we have shifted to other schoolings, which, because they're basically, in America, there's the wonderful Juilliard School, there's a fabulous music school. But imagine if everyone goes to the same teacher. Then, the stylistic differences get slightly, I wouldn't say erased, but they get more narrow. And in Europe, I don't know where to send the violin students to, actually. It's really very difficult. So what we hear today in violin playing has to do with the lack in variation of violin teachers. We have lost the French school, the Belgian school, the Russian school. It all has mingled into something which is beautiful, but not very distinctive, let's put it that way.
What's your relationship with perfection? One of my favorite stories to tell is Raphael Kubelik was leading a rehearsal with the Vienna Philharmonic, and at some point he suddenly stopped them and he said, "Why do you all think that perfection is about accuracy? Please show me a different kind of perfection." But I think being obsessed with perfection, whatever your personal, with whatever your own personal definition of perfection is, that could be an exhausting, endless pursuit. Martha Argerich, for example, she once said that she has a hard time going on to stage because people feel like they expect, however they feel, Martha Argerich should sound.
I saw her recently with my son, and it's true, the expectation of her, I have to admit, are huge, but she always exceeds it. So, but going back to the understanding of perfection, sometimes what I find in chamber music with colleagues of mine is the understanding that playing absolutely together is the goal. But this is not true, because friction and different viewpoints in a given moment in a musical score are important. So perfection cannot mean that you are totally in sync. Perfection in itself, as we know, is the death, because it's once you reach it, then what? So I wouldn't be too concerned about it, really. I see what you are saying, that we are aiming for a slick performance, but that should obviously not be the goal, because most important is really what an audience takes away from the evening. The musical gesture, your involvement, your struggle. I mean, in Beethoven's music, much of the aesthetic of the music and why we are so drawn to it and why it touches us so deeply is because he struggles, and playing it is a struggle because it's technically so, I wouldn't say badly written, but so against the instrument. Think of the second movement of the triple concerto for the pianist. You know, all these parallel runs. It's
actually very difficult.
Yeah, although it was as a training piece for Rudolf, Archduke Rudolf. But anyhow, so the struggle momentum is important in music. And I much rather see a musician on stage sweat and struggle and play wrong notes, and there's excitement in it, and I can see he's pulling all the stops. He's just all in. And this is what the arts needs. All in, all the time.
I know that you're planning on taking some time off in 2021. What's that about, and how do you plan for a musical career with longevity?
I don't know, how do you plan? Life happens while you're making plans. You know, when I was young, I was looking into the future and I thought, oh my God, when I'm 40, I probably need a roller, you know, and I'll be so old, I will hardly be able to hold the bow up. Turns out to be, I can still walk without, you know, help. So I'm planning longevity, that's not the point. I'm not planning that. I'm very grateful for the life I have, obviously. And I'm grateful for the projects I will work on for the next 1 or 2 years. But I'm very aware of that this is a profession which is totally unforgiving, and that there will come a moment when I will not go on stage anymore. And this is not something I'm looking forward to, but it makes the now for me even more precious. So not planning for the big future. I'm having a sabbatical because I've always had in my life sabbatical. Sometimes it had to do with pregnancies. In this case, it doesn't have to do with pregnancy. I just need to step away from the speed of my life. Too many overseas flights, not enough study time, not enough time for life, definitively. I can hardly remember. Oh, the last book I read was about Rodin and Rilke, wonderful book by an American author. But, you know, knowing that there's not enough time to read or go to the cinema or see your family, that is alarming. That is really very alarming, and young people shouldn't go that far. I will, you know, finish the Beethoven year in 2020, and then that's it, folks. I'm gone for a while.
And finally, what's inspiring you these days? What do you reflect on in the rare free time?
Oh, inspiring can be much. A butterfly, a mountain, people. The other day I did a benefit concert for children in Yemen, because since the war broke out back then, that's a few months ago, 85,000 children had died, either through bombs or illnesses or malnutrition. And I was addressing for Save the Children the audience and asking for, it was in Hamburg in the New Philharmonie, for 10 euros per person, and there are 2,800 people in the hall. And a few days later, I got a donation over, I don't know, 28,000 euros by a single couple, because they felt so sad about what is happening in Yemen every single day, and about all these innocent, you know, grown-ups and particularly children who have to die, that they made this donation. That is inspiring to me. That shows me, wow, we can do things, we can change the world, and we have to change the world, and we have to work together. And this is my inspiration. I want to know when I go from this earth that I have touched lives, and I've maybe for a few people, I was able to make their circumstance better.
Anne-Sophie, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you
Great
for this
pleasure.
conversation about life with regards to music.
Great
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Yes.